Our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by our friends at Zapper, the world's leading augmented reality platform and creative studio, with over 11 years of experience working with the world's biggest brands through Zapper Creative Studio. Zapper also has an award-winning web AR platform, ZapWorks, that lets you create your own mobile AR magic. Finally, check out their Zap Box, the most affordable mixed reality headset on the planet. Start creating AR over at zap.works or talk to them about your next AR project at zapper.com. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Shilowitz and Roni Abovitz. It's This Week in XR for June 2nd, 2023. I am at AWE in Santa Clara, California, which is right outside San Jose. It's in Silicon Valley with 6,000 of my close personal friends talking about AR and VR and all things spatial and volumetric. Ted, you were missed.
I felt missed. I felt the energy in the room. I did watch your fantastic Roni on Portal, you in live event, which was great. I think it was probably one of the highlights of the conference. Is the conference still going on today, or is it done today?
Today's the last day of the expo.
But all the talks are done now, yeah? Or there's still more talks?
There's still some today, but obviously people get to go on Friday. It's, not the best.
There were some good ones. I mean, I caught Neil's opening stuff, which was fine. Nothing really.
He's not the most dynamic speaker.
Yeah, I mean, nothing really groundbreaking there. But I tell you, I watched.
Super nice guy. By the way, I had a great conversation with him in the speaker ready room for about a half an hour, just about writing.
Yeah,
Can I just say something about that?
Roni knows that too.
I had the most amazing hangout day with Neil. It was in front of a conference talk we were at, and he basically was working on a story, and we just sort of disappeared, and we had milk and cookies, and for 4 or 5 hours there was no one else around. He turned into Neil the storyteller. When there's not a lot of people around, he's like a really different person. But in public, he told me this, he's like an Ent, from Tolkien. But behind the scenes, he's much more of a live.
Yeah, it's funny.
You can tell that being the face of Lamina One has not been. He told me, I told myself 2022 was going to be all about Lamina One, and then I was going to get to go back to writing. He said, but it's very hard to stop once you get started, being the face of the company, working with all the engineers on trying to realize the vision as they slowly onboard people like Rebecca Barkin. So starting a company is very, very,
and it's exciting. You don't want to walk away.
Yes. So anyway, Lamina One people were here, of course, as well as folks like Alvin Graylin. Everybody asked about you, Ted. I will say this. This is exactly the same as AWE always is.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you've had this experience 10 times.
Yes, that's true. And they'll be always next year.
And they'll be next year, and it'll be exactly the same again. That's what's good about it. And that's also why you can miss one and just be missed, and it'll be fine. And again, as I said to you last week when we were talking about this, everybody you want to talk to, you talk to all the time anyway.
That's true. Yeah. In fact, I was talking to our metaphysics friends yesterday in a meeting. But it's interesting, Roni, you mentioned about Neil in a more private setting. Because we've had a couple of creative meetings in Los Angeles about projects. He's incredibly gregarious and interesting in a smaller, more intimate setting because he's a writer and he wants to create, and it's fascinating. But I'll tell you the one session that I did watch, because I was obviously tuning in remotely as much as I could. And I caught part of it, and I want to go back and watch the whole thing. At the end of yesterday, they brought an author who I'm a huge fan of named Daniel Suarez onto the stage. I don't know, Charlie.
Yeah, he's great.
Chance to watch his talk.
Damon, right? Damon.
Damon is his first book, and he's written 4 or 5 other books. He was so on point and so interesting, and I had to kind of pop in and out because I was doing other stuff. But I think I would encourage everybody to listen to this, to watch his session, because I have a feeling the stuff I missed was just as good as the stuff I watched.
All the talks are going to be free and posted sometime next week on awe.live for those of you who are listening. Of course, the talks are one of the best parts of AWE. Every topic was covered. So tracks that I missed and talks that I missed. There's so many, conflicts. You have to make choices. It's a little like South by Southwest, but unlike South by Southwest, you can go back later and see the talks. So
Can I tell you what, Charlie, I mean, I was only there as a photon. You were there physically. Ted was there in spirit. But I feel like this year's AWE feels very important. And the reason is like in the midst of AWE, Meta makes a huge announcement and the specter of whatever Apple may do next week is coming. It feels like AWE is perfectly positioned to be that place, absorbing the energy. And I don't know if the excitement was palpable, but I think people feel like XR is about to get its second or third big boost.
Another breath.
And people who've been hanging on and waiting for that, it feels like a big player is going to enter, but the whole market may start to like pick up again and move in an interesting way.
Apple and AI are obviously the topics du jour. Last year, we were talking about the metaverse. Nobody's really talking about that now. AI has kind of sucked the actually Avi Barziv, who we've had on the show, who's worked on a lot of the major headsets, including the upcoming Apple Reality One, gave a great talk, and he was talking about hype bubbles in the metaverse specifically, and he said hype does not deflate, it explodes.
Yeah,
and the metaverse took months and months of hype before anyone started paying attention, and then the hype went on for another year, but inevitably there was a pop, and he gave examples of all the different pops, and he's predicting the same thing with AI. We have ridiculous expectations of what it's going to do, and in about 6 months everybody's going to turn around and say, who said this was going to change the world? and then with the hype deflated, it will go on to change the world.
Yes, that's the thing. After all the people who don't know what they're talking about start like buzzing around, and then when it doesn't happen in 3 seconds, but it really does, like it really ultimately does have that like next kind of phase to it where it does restructure, change the world, probably not in ways that everyone completely anticipates.
So I thought our talk went well, Roni. And for those of you listening, Roni was in Fort Lauderdale in something called an art box, which is, he's being shot against a white background with a stereo camera, and it's projected into this box sitting on stage. And I was physically live, and we had a conversation. I thought the latency was okay, not great. But
it seemed okay remote. Watching it remote, the latency was better than I've seen from some big broadcast satellite and network things. Like,
yeah, the satellite things
are having a conversation.
Satellite things are notoriously bad, and of course you see it in TV news where they say, I'm going to you now, Ted, and it takes like 10 seconds for Ted to actually hear what the guy just said on the air. So,
but Charlie, as a aspect of like co-presence, which I think is going to be one of the big things in XR.
Yes,
like this was a whole contraption to do that, but I think we can already do things where you don't need that contraption, but you and I both have to have a headset. But it feels like in this next 5 to 10 years, what you and I did, it took some setup, may just become like we're doing the Zoom right now. And might be a lot more fluid. Like I could walk on the stage, you and I could look each other in the eye, we could share digital objects. More and more you'll feel like you're actually there. That's going to be very interesting. I mean, for those of us who've experienced that behind the scenes, not the thing we did on stage, but like where all that goes, you know it's happening. It just tastes it.
One of the things I know is going to be in the Apple device is some kind of avatar chat that has presence. And they worked really hard on that. I think that may be one of the things that's kind of delayed them because they really think Messenger is important. And Messenger has social media has become more distrusted. Messenger has benefited from it. So
as a precursor to what may happen next week or in 3 days, what do you guys think of the Quest 3? Do you think they're back on track after the Quest Pro was a little bit of a miss? You're shaking your heads no.
Oh, no, it's a really great. I love that you brought it up because their timing was like AWE. We dropped this as a spoiler in front of Apple. But anyway, I'd love to hear Charlie's take first. I have a pretty dark take.
It's the most impressive thing is the color pass-through. And they showed a bumper TV type thing, a minute and a half of the headset and the kind of experiences you can have with it. And if you really can have mixed reality experiences, I think the headset could represent a great new direction for them. Meta is in a tough position with VR. They pitched this device to gamers, and gamers prefer game consoles. They did not draw them away from those other screens. Their utilization has crashed. They said they sold $1.5 billion of software in 2 years. That is nothing. There's nothing.
Well, any startup would have happy to take that, but
they're not a startup.
Yeah, well,
for them it's nothing.
They spent 10 billion to return $1 billion, so it's a little bit of a
No, they spent way more than 10 billion.
So I don't think this headset is going to solve that problem. Right? You have one sitting in a drawer and you're like, okay, I know virtual reality. That said, the specs are much better. It's much lighter. It generates less heat. It's got the new Snapdragon chip in it, which is twice as fast as the current generation. So it's going to be better. It's still super cheap at $400. In my opinion, they must be taking a loss at that price, because the retailer is going to take 30-50% of the retail price. So I hope the mixed reality, I expect the mixed reality will be good. And, the trick is, do they have the kind of software for mixed reality that makes you, when you see somebody else's, say, I have to have that. And it's not, and this is where they could peel away from competing with console games.
So Charlie, here's my take though on what's going to happen. One, if Apple does something next week, I'm still holding out. There's at this point, maybe a 10% chance it was all just noise and rumor, but there's so much shaking of the trees. There's probably a bear, an elephant in the woods. So let's say 90% chance they do something next week. I would not want to be working at Reality Labs the next day after that, because I think there's going to be yelling and screaming and all kinds of stuff. But here's what's going to happen.
Interesting.
Mark is a very committed person and a fighter. And I'm just saying, because this is just my take. I've met him and I've met Tim Cook over the years. I'll just give you my perspective. I think what's really interesting is, like, Mark loves to play strategy games, and the tougher the opponent, the more he goes into gear, right? So it's kind of like, this is like the thing that's getting him going, because it's not easy. It's like suddenly you find an opponent that makes your game go up and is beating you. And Apple's going to crush them next week if they ship something. But then what is he going to do? He's going to do everything in his human and superhuman surrounding powers with every penny he's got to figure out how to beat them. Once Apple shows its hand, you can then extrapolate where they're going, because they're not like massive innovators beyond the first drop. It's kind of like, you can just go, all right, once you see the first thing, we could draw a picture of like the X Reality Apple 10. Mark's going to go into complete overdrive and like focus the team on beating them and getting them better prices and marshaling everyone who hates Apple, every kind of manufacturer, partner, whatever. I think you're going to see like this intensity, but it's going to feel like an epic, almost like the Avengers Infinity War. I think it's going to be like this really amazing moment where these sides battle up because the huge alpha predator has shown up on the scene, and all the others are kind of like realizing this is an existential threat materialized. It's no longer the possibility of Apple destroying them. It's real now.
AWE is mostly developers, right? That's why Magic Leap is here. That's why Xreal is here. And the Apple launch is going to be nothing but good for those developers. And Qualcomm has developed a plugin to, or an SDK for game engines that makes interoperability almost an afterthought. So you can develop for the Quest 3 and the Pico 4 at the exact same time. You don't have to do anything. Spaces does everything for you, and it saves developers weeks of work, right? It used to be really hard to port an HTC Vive title to, let's say, the Quest. It was, a journey, adjusting the number of polygons per frame, changing the controller configurations. It was, people had to think about, is it worth it? It's so much time. So that's going to go away. So the Apple thing, I'm sure Apple will get integrated in. Unity and Unreal are very good platforms for mobile development.
Unreal and Apple, I don't know.
Well, Unreal is participating in Spaces now. So I would expect they're going to extend it. They'd be foolish if they didn't embrace the Apple ecosystem. And my point is, with all the developers here, this is nothing but great for them. This is nothing but great for them.
Okay, so here's a philosophical question for the both of you. Knowing what has happened in the last war that you're sort of referring to, Roni, of the smartphones, do you think when and if Apple puts something into the market? Now, we know that Samsung and Google have already announced this partnership to build some sort of headset product. They've been a little more public than our friends, on the Apple side of the world. Do you see the same trajectory where Samsung, Google, HTC, Oppo, all the other sort of companies that will build lookalike products to the iPhone will learn from what Apple eventually does within that marketplace and just builds effectively the clone, which is what the Android device is a clone of the iPhone. So do you
What
think
I think is going to happen, Ted, is that, and I'm biased on this, on one of these parts, they're going to have the Apple device in the lab, and they're going to have the Magic Leap 2 in the lab, and every team in the world is going to be tearing down both of those and trying to figure out, how do you get the best of both? Because the race is going to be, whatever qualities Apple shows, it's still, if the rumors are true, you're still doing pass-through video. And then you have the existence proof that you don't need that. And that's a much bigger adoption. You can actually see the world directly. And then some players are like, how do we fuse them? When do we fuse them? What happens? There's gonna be this really interesting race for the merger of those two things into a much lighter system. By the way, I think like Chinese companies, Korean companies, Japanese companies, now that Apple will lay something out, they're gonna go into overdrive. They're gonna throw the machinery of like miniaturization, and they have massive graduates in optics, like 1,000 times more than we do in the United States. I mean, there's gonna be all sorts of innovation in optics coming out of China and Japan and Korea once Apple lays down its gauntlet, and they may outpace everyone in the West. It's gonna be very interesting.
So people have been asking me here.
Is it a confirmed thing that Meta has made a partnership with Magic Leap on the optics side, or is it just extended rumors and stories? Is it confirmed?
I don't know.
Because I think your point, Roni, is pretty interesting, right? If Mark Zuckerberg, as you said, he will not give up a fight, and he's very aware and smart around the technology around him. Did he make a really good pick, even if it's not fully public yet, and those rumors are true? Is that a really smart trajectory for him?
I will say this, I'm going to avoid that question entirely. What I can answer, there is public information about the amount of IP Magic Leap has. I won't comment about beyond that, but if you look at that, if you understood how many claims there are per patent, it's my view, and obviously biased, I think it's impossible for any major player not to be stepping all over all those claims.
Right.
So I think there's gonna, if you're really gearing up for battle, like, who's the allies, who's the axis, I think sides are going to get drawn. It's going to be like, it's going to be Apple OS versus possibly everybody.
Oh,
because
yeah.
everyone else stands to lose. Apple is an entirely closed ecosystem, and they are going to charge whatever toll they want. And that's what Tim Sweeney is rallying about. You might find like an entire armada of everyone else gearing up against Apple, because Apple's so big and so good. You might find like enemies becoming bedfellows. Like, it's going to be very interesting.
Everybody here, when they stop you in the hallway after the expo floor opens, they're like, what have you seen? What have you seen? And I always say, what are you excited about? 4K per eye. That's what I'm excited about. Give me 4K per eye. I'm just going to look at it. It's going to be like being in outer space. You're not going to be on Earth when you're looking through 4K per eye.
All I can say is I wish I had a piece of the internet traffic money on June 5th. Someone's going to make a lot of money.
I'll be in front of a computer at whatever it is, 8 a.m. Pacific, to see it. And
Charlie, can we make an on-air prediction about it?
Go ahead.
If you look at I think it's like 326 pixels per inch. I got to double check that, which is the Apple Watch. And if you look at where it is against your eye, right? I'll explain why I'm bringing this up. It's sort of like eye to wrist, which is like 12 to 14 inches, right? So retina resolution is not at least not the way they're going to do it with a display, that kind of display. It's not everywhere, right? It's at a certain distance. This is my guess. that it's being set between eye and like where you might hold an Apple Watch and maybe some distance out. There'll be some kind of like zone where they've tested it that you'll have like this kind of retinal resolution thing, and it, you won't be able to bring it in earlier because they'll sort of dial in the focus of the optics to be at that distance. Why am I saying this? I think the Apple Watch represents the lowest resolution I personally expect them to ship. If they ship worse than that, I think it's just gonna be tarred and feathered by the press. I think it has to be at least that good. And the Apple Watch isn't perfect, but it is, if you have that against your eye, it's going to be better than any other virtual reality system by far. Even the really expensive ones with the foveated, they're able to actually make it across the entire thing. So you just basically appear retinal resolution, really sharp, really clear. I think that's why they went with pass-through in order to make that happen. And my guess is it's going to be very, very close to the pixel density or the retinal resolution quality of an Apple Watch against the eye at that distance. But let's see what happens on Monday.
So, fellas, I think this is all
Look at Ted. Wait, Ted gave it away. You're a bad poker player, Ted. You
I'm
just
not
made an
giving anything
eyebrow
away.
move. I'm made an eyebrow move.
I know, keeping secrets from us, Ted, is not good for our relationship. I think I've mentioned that.
I don't have any secrets. I
don't know anything. It's possible Ted doesn't know anything at all.
It's very possible I don't know anything about anything.
Yeah, I guess, but
Your smile
I don't know if you
away.
get Star Trek without Ted.
All I can tell you without revealing or not revealing what I may or may not know about anything in the world is my instinct is there's a game time decision to be had.
Ooh.
That, what is it? It's June 2nd today, and they've got 3 days to decide.
20% chance it ain't happening.
So you think there are some engineers pulling all-nighters right now?
I kind of do. And
yes.
And I kind of wonder, is there a line in Vegas on betting, will Apple release a new product category on June 5th? Is there a bet can be made?
Ted, I'm on record saying there's a 20% chance nothing happens, 80% it does.
That's a healthy bet. I would take that bet in Vegas. I'd take that line.
Fellas, I got to get back to work. Coming up after the show, I've got a couple of interviews I did. I talked to John Riccitiello yesterday. He has some great perspectives. He's the CEO of Unity. I'm going to try and get Paul Travers. Everybody has been on this podcast at this point. So I'm just trying to grab a few bites. I will tell you one thing about Paul Travers, the co-founder and CEO of Vuzix, which for those of you who don't know, they have generally made industrial headsets. They're very good. Their headsets are highly regarded. So they're a public company worth over $1 billion. And you walk in the room, Vuzix has the booth right next to the door. And there's Paul Travers standing in the booth, pitching a bunch of random strangers.
Yeah.
And, typically in a booth, you don't find the CEO
of $1 billion company. Yeah.
On his feet, pitching his heart out for his company's product, and it shows you why he has been successful.
I do have one AWE question before you wrap up, Charlie. How do we think our friends at Qualcomm did this year? Because for those that don't track this as close as we do, Qualcomm owns this sector. I mean, they own everybody's.
They're the unifying glue,
except for two.
Except for two, that's correct. Except for Magic Leap and maybe our friends at Cupertino. But I'm just curious how they showed this year. How did they do?
They did great. I mean, Snapdragon has, the Spaces software has turned out to be, every time Spaces was mentioned in the room on day one, people broke out in applause.
Right.
But people are genuinely grateful to Qualcomm, and it doesn't cost anything. Mm-hmm. It's just free, and it becomes part of your development interface. So I think what they did was significant, and people appreciated it. I mean, they're very popular here. Hugo gave a keynote. Several of their other executives spoke. I think they're the gold sponsor, like maybe Zapper is. Zapper is also very present here. They are our sponsor and our friends. They have a new headset, by the way. They used to have the Zap Box, which was cardboard. It was the cardboard of AR. They sold about 5,000 of those, and now they're making the second generation. And the second generation, you don't have to put together. It comes all put together. I'll write about this in the column when I get around to that later this weekend. And there's a plastic holder for your smartphone, but it is very, very good. The anchoring, with the paper one, they had a lot of anchoring and registration problems. They didn't have a lot of software. That was 2016. Right now, it's 2023, and the second generation is really good. There's so many things like that I want to tell you guys about and that I want to write about. So AWE is great. I miss you, Ted. Roni, you would have so much fun here if you were in person. I don't think you understand what a celebrity you would be.
Next year at AWE, really quick, there's one interesting news announcement that I wanted to drop that we'd be remiss not to. So yesterday, there's a startup in LA called Emerge. I don't know if you guys know them, but they make a multi-sensory haptic touch system. They announced a partnership with Disney. I just thought that was interesting. Like, there's a lot of noise, Apple and all that stuff, but what's really interesting about Emerge, and I know Sly Lee, I don't know if you guys have met him.
Oh yeah, this is you're not wearing a glove, you're using air. Right, there's a pad over your hand, like a mouse.
It's like a tablet that sits on the table and you put your hand through. Now, what's interesting, I'm just bringing it up because everything has been about visual and sound and haptics with gloves. What I find interesting about Emerge is that, think about a loved one. You're in Europe, you're in China, you're in the United States, or loved ones in Mexico. The ability to touch someone and have that feeling is actually something that's been overlooked, and it's where they put all their focus. I just think it's interesting that they have a partnership with Disney that got announced yesterday. Something for us to put in the back of mind, because it's like the multi-sensory expansion of XR is really interesting. Like, AI is the intelligence piece, there's visual, there's sound, feel, but touch is going to make it feel very profound. Our friends from the AR house, like the thing in the bed and
Lucas,
there's all these more human emotional things coming. I think Emerge is representing a more emotional interaction, which is not only whizzy graphics. I just think it's something interesting, and we could go into it another.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've tested the device for years and years. I felt like the promise and the concept and the philosophy was very strong, but the execution never got anywhere close to me getting excited about the actual delivery. Now, you put Disney and Disney's aspirations with a technology company like that, maybe that's a magic chemistry that turns this into something that a guy like me and regular people around the world are amazed by. I was not amazed at any stage of testing this thing. But
the concept you're excited by.
That doesn't mean my euphoria around getting it right isn't there. I'll tell you what I did do at South by is there's a company called Docomo that bought they bought a lot of different startups, technology startups. They bought a small startup that was doing a haptic pneumatic vest that allowed you to do a virtual remote hug, and it fully weepy kind of experience.
Really?
You imagine giving a hug to someone that is no longer alive, a relative of yours, and you can have a VR version of them, and they hug you, and it's just the synapses go crazy. It was phenomenal.
Love to try that.
But super exotic, right? This is not anything they're going to take to scale.
Right. Well, I think that's part of the problem with what Sly has developed. I like him, by the way. I think he's an interesting guy and a really tenacious entrepreneur. That said, I thought there was too much friction. To buy a big device, to put it next to your computer, it's going to be expensive. The sensation is mild.
The
sensation there's no force feedback. There's no.
Think about it at a theme park, though, where you have a story and the right setting and it's hidden and you just have that little moment of magic.
Totally.
That's perfect, right? You need to surround it with this other stuff.
I think that's right. Exactly right.
Disney knows how to make magic out of technology better than anybody else in the world.
Look, imagine touching Tinkerbell's finger for just a second. And you're a kid, and if it's all done in a way that's Imagineered. I know you're at Paramount, Ted, but we both love.
No, I'm just very excited.
That would just be
I'm a big fan,
right? It'd be awesome.
So last thing I want to bring up, gosh, this show is going to be long. Last thing I want to bring up.
This is like the free jazz.
Leia had a display. Leia is the 3D iPad. It's an Android pad. It is so unbelievably good.
It's really good.
It's fun to watch.
Oh, you like it? Okay, you do like it.
Yeah, I really do. And they had
It's a cool device. Yeah.
Yeah, and they had a big display there in the front of the hall. I didn't get, Ronnie, I'm going to try and get a shot that shows that Magic Leap is bordered on one side by Spacetop and on the other side by X-Reel.
Hey.
just to drive you crazy.
Just don't get me going on that.
Guys, I wish you were both here. It's been fun, but it is going to be just like this again next year. So, Ted, all you have to do is imagine last year to know what this year was about.
Exactly.
And again, it's mostly
everybody that helped us, like Sonia and that the whole team with
yes,
with it ARHT. Did I say that right?
Art. It's called Art, even though there's
Art.
an H in the
Yeah, I think
HRT
Sonia and her
Art.
team, like the fact that they just stuck to it, was so entrepreneurial, and they made it work.
Yep.
And the team made it work, and everyone worked really hard. I don't think people realize how hard behind the scenes
It should have been a lot easier than it was.
But the fact that the teams didn't give up, it's a human story. Just want to thank Sonia and everyone involved. It was great.
Yeah, they did a great job. This is a very, very well run show. And they have a big stage. There were over 700 people in the room for our presentation, and I think many thousands listening live. I don't know what the number was, but they were expecting about 10,000 people.
Last idea for next year. Do you want to do a This Week in XR Augie special award? Do you want to create a category that is picked by this group?
Ooh. All right, we got a year to think about this. I like that.
A year to think about it.
I like that though. By the way, everybody I run into is like, I'm a fan of the podcast.
It's cool.
So,
well, I put my AWE presentation for this year in the closet until next year. So we'll see how it goes. Does it hold up a year from now? I guess we'll find out.
But Ted, we're really glad you picked the recover speedily and
Versus-
home path. Yes.
Well, Charlie, I hope you don't get a cold. I talked to about 6 friends that were there, and half of them have a cold.
I have a cold.
I probably you do have a cold. I probably made the right decision.
You made the right decision.
My doctors would literally take me out back and shoot me if I got a cold. Like
you may
not get a cold.
You made the right decision. Absolutely, 100%. And people are concerned. Everybody asks. So. And everybody was very relieved to hear you're on the mend and going back to work and
all working inside there,
and have retained your sense of humor and your love of life. So
that's
what it's all about.
Patriots, right? There's a QB spot open, or I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, never know.
All right, everybody, that's our show for this week. Hang on for the interviews from AWE. I'm here with John Riccitiello from Unity, who just gave a talk which revolved around sustainability, but it hit a whole lot more. And I'd like to catch up on a couple of those topics with you right now, John, starting with the state of the metaverse. You gave a great talk last year where you defined it incredibly broadly, and obviously that was very wise. Today, has AI completely made the conversation about the metaverse irrelevant, or is it just going to sleep for a while?
So, look, a year ago I talked about the metaverse in terms very different than you see or hear from a lot of companies. I talked about it as being more real-time, 3D, interactive, social, persistent. What I was getting at, and said quite bluntly last year, it's not about a canned 3D world where you sort of hang out and other people come to join you, because I don't think that's actually a particularly big idea. And so what I was talking about within the construct of Unity is we're building lots of metaverses. They're digital twins for our customers. And they're getting all sorts of things, from whether it's classrooms or manufacturing lines or entire environments for doing R&D, but they're getting something very specific, not this broad, generic, everything plugs in. And so, honestly, I left this event and went home to Unity and said, we're not allowed to use the word metaverse anymore. And the reason I said that was, while I thought we had a crisp definition for what it meant, this conference convinced me there were 4,000 definitions, and most of them were not likely to last as long as it took me to drive back to San Francisco. And so I felt that the word had become so meaningless that it was destined to fall. And so that was sort of my sense of things going into and out of AWE last time.
AI. How's it going to affect Unity and, most importantly, Unity's developers?
So I think I give you a very different answer on AI versus, when we're talking about the metaverse. Now, first off, in the context of things, think about all of the biggest sort of meme technologies that get talked about, and then which ones are real. In my lifetime, we've seen 2D gaming giving way to 3D gaming. We've seen the internet come along and get multiplayer off the couch and into your living room. We've seen mobile. We've seen a lot of discussion. I remember when for some reason we had to digitally print everything. Web3, metaverse, and now AI. And I think it's super important to distinguish which of those are small ideas or non-ideas and which of those are really big ideas. So, early on in my career, I bet a career on 3D gaming prevailing over 2D gaming and moving all of our technology in that direction. That turned out to be a good call. Another call that many people had to make was, are they going to build multiplayer gaming? If you look at games, like the biggest, first-person shooter games, they were single-player games, and then they became multiplayer games, and almost nobody even plays the campaign anymore. It's all about multiplayer. So certain things have changed the fabric of things. And I would argue that while I'm just deprecating a little bit and being somewhat negative about the notion of metaverse, I was equally sort of negative on issues Web3. It doesn't mean that it won't be Web3 applications in games and it won't be metaverse applications, but I am really bullish on AI. I think it's the biggest thing we've seen. It's going to be profoundly important.
Can we elaborate on that a little bit? In what ways in the creative process do you think it's going to contribute to changing games and developing what games are today as an art form?
So I would argue that for sort of a gaming community, there's 2.5 ways that it's going to change everything. So one is content creation. So, the question of is generative art, is AI going to replace you as a programmer, replace you as an artist? The answer to that question, I think, is no. But you might be challenged for your job by a creator, a programmer, or technologist, or an artist that does use AI effectively. It is going to make you more productive. It's going to make you more successful. It is going to make you, infinitely able to produce more work faster. Now, great companies are going to say, hey, I've got this turbocharger. Do I make a better game or do I make the same game cheaper? And in the scheme of things, the guys that make, the companies, the guys and gals that make better games are going to prevail. So there's going to be a tendency for some, the narrow-minded and the small-minded, to just make the same thing cheaper. And, certain, AAA games, for example, have got so expensive to build, I get the notion. But what this uncorks is limitless possibilities within the construct of what we used to build. You can build bigger, better, and faster, and you need to learn the skills. If you're a programmer and you're not, working with a Copilot or something like it, if you're an artist not working with some of these tools, now you're going to go back and forth between deterministic tools where you might go, something in generative art and then go back to Maya to edit and all the things you do. It's going to go back and forth. I mean, if you're trying to write a script, you're going to prompt with natural language. You're going to bring it back into, and edit it yourself. You're going to go back and forth. Your creativity is still at the core. Don't forget that. I'm a true believer in that. This is your turbocharger. It's a platform to stand on. That's one. The second one is it's possible now to create things that you couldn't create before. So typically in a game of any type, not all of them, but many of them, there are inanimate objects, NPCs, non-player characters, and we're tired of these things sometimes because they're, somebody wrote three lines of dialogue.
They're fake.
They're fake.
You're talking about InWorld's product. I'm moderating a panel with Kaylin, the founder, and John Guetta, their chief creative, this afternoon.
Well, and so these characters are fake, and somebody brilliant wrote 3 lines of dialogue for them, or 5 lines of dialogue, and I credit you for that creativity. But who wants to interact with an NPC with 3 lines of dialogue? That's like, opening the same fortune cookie 3 times and right. Hoping for inspiration on the 3rd read. It's not going to be exciting. And so what I think we're going to find is it's going to be possible to take a character, whether that character is a giraffe, a rock, a car, but more likely than not, some sort of human or humanoid. And you're going to be able to give it a backstory, you're going to be able to give it ambitions, and it will interact with you in a way that feels real in what was the jailbroken version of large language models when you could interact with them before the powers that be shut them down.
Right.
And they can interact with each other, and you can create.
So the game could go on with you not there.
The world can go on with you out there. So you can build a model of the Bronx or a model of Brooklyn, fill it with 1 million NPCs, and that world can be alive in such a way that just hanging out would be cool.
So it sounds a little like Westworld.
It sounds a lot like Westworld. and the point here is when you create that, you're going to find that the entire notion of building a game is sort of inverted in process. Just like, ChatGPT, you'll build all these NPCs, they're going to need to be trained by human interaction. So instead of maybe putting a beta out there, you'll put a untrained, character building version out there. And will that not be wild? When they're not, I don't know what that's going to be like. It's going to be immersive. I don't think
anybody does, right?
And we don't, and that's what's exciting. And just to plug a little bit for Unity here, what most people imagine is they're going to sort of plug, ChatGPT or some similar tool into the brain cells of one of these characters. But that's an expensive process and it's slow. It's going to ping a server, and by itself that could take a while. It's got to conjure the answer. Not as fluid and potentially quite expensive. One of the technologies we've developed at Unity, we call it Barracuda now. It's a code name. We'll give it a real name in a matter of months. But it's an inference engine that sits inside the runtime, which is on the mobile device, or it's in the console, or it's in the PC. So what that enables you to do is if you want these NPCs to be alive, they can be alive with the same response time of any other command response that you would give in a game, instantly. And because you're using the CPU and the GPU on device, from your perspective, it's largely free. The alternative is to have a game that you got paid X dollars or minutes or pennies for, and then have to pay 2 cents a minute to, some nameless, very large company that's charging you, for that. And why not do it on device where you can build your business successfully while breaking new ground creatively?
John, it's been a great conversation. I appreciate you taking time with us today, and hopefully we'll see you on the podcast again soon.
All right, thanks, Charlie.
Hey, I'm here with Hugo Swart. He is the man in XR. The Qualcomm chips that his company makes powers most of the XR devices in our world, and they have a leadership role at this conference. They speak every year. They're one of the gold sponsors. They have a very prominent booth for Snapchat Spaces, which has been universally acclaimed by every single developer here. Every time Hugo in his keynote mentioned Snapchat Spaces, people spontaneously broke out into applause. Hugo, that must have been very satisfying.
No, it was great. Yeah, I think we really like AWE. The community is so vibrant, and you see a lot of the innovations that are coming. And here, we focused on 2 main areas. First was on the new devices using our chips. We showed Oppo with their new MR headset, and then Lenovo showing, their VRX now commercially available with Snapdragon Spaces. And then on augmented reality, you have the all-in-ones with Digilens and TCL Ray Neo, both on Snapdragon Spaces. So that's right. You heard a lot of Snapdragon Spaces and excitement in the show with all these hardware supporting it. And then on the software and ecosystem, we announced a new feature called Dual Render Fusion. And the idea there is that you take smartphone applications that once you have a glass paired with it, just become better. You still continue using the app on the phone, but once the app detects, oh, there is a glass, you have an extension. This could be a game that now you play on the phone, but there's a map, there's explosions that you see around it. It could be a cooking application like we showed with Kitch on stage. We showed another one with Red Bull. So, amazing amount of traction we have seen with Snapdragon Spaces, and in particular with this feature.
A lot of excitement at the show for Apple's coming announcement about the Reality One headset. Obviously, it's a headset that Qualcomm doesn't have anything to do with. You work with the smaller companies like Google and Samsung. But what do you think the introduction of that device is going to do for the community, even though its full impact won't be felt for a couple of years?
Well, we see, more people coming with hardware just give credibility to our industry, creates excitement, create opportunity for developers to make money across various hardware form factors. So we welcome the introduction of more hardware to the industry.
Well, I hope it not only helps the developers who we depend on make more money, but perhaps it will continue to call attention to XR. Can we talk about the Google Samsung project, or is that for some other time?
Well, Samsung announced during the Unpacked event that the three companies are working together, and this come from it's not new, right? And when you look into how we build Android together, and how today the three companies have a close collaboration across multiple segments. So this is one more segment that the companies are working together.
So I know that we haven't seen the new Quest 3 yet, but they did go to great lengths to, in their introduction yesterday, talk about the new Snapchat chip that's going to make things work a lot faster and load a lot faster and dissipate more heat, and just sounds like a huge advance in the XR2 chipset family. So what can you tell us about that?
I'll keep suspense on that. But yesterday, I think what was said is it's a new platform with twice the graphics capability. So it's gonna take devices to the next level, and we are super happy with the collaboration with Meta. Last year, both our CEOs announced a multi-generation collaboration, and you start to see the fruit of that come to life.
I can't wait to see it. Hugo, thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next AWE.
All right, thank you so much. It was great seeing you. It was great to see, the audience here, the vibe, the motivation continues in our industry.
See you next Friday. Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.